Welcome to Those Were the Days. I'm Nancy Martin, the library archivist. The topic of today's program is Read All About It, Peters Township in the News. I thought it might be fun to revisit events from the township's past that made it into area newspapers. The headlines we'll discuss date from the 1890s until the 1990s. I did my best to include a mix of humorous, tragic, and criminal-related articles. I thought it would be interesting to see how many of the events described you already know about and how many are news to you. News about happenings in Peters Township could be found in a variety of historic newspapers, including the Daily Notes out of Canonsburg, the Monongahela Valley Republican, later the Daily Herald out of Monongahela, the Washington Observer or Observer Reporter out of Washington, PA, and the Peters Township Chamber of Commerce's Commerce News, Peters Township News, and Peters Township News Progress. Information about Peters also appeared in Pittsburgh-based papers, including the Pittsburgh Press and Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Our first article comes from the Monongahela Valley Republican in 1896. It has no headline but describes the death of a local man at Hackett Station. The article reports that Theophilus Vincent, a French miner, was killed by a freight train while walking on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad track at Hackett. It was determined that he'd been drinking in Finleyville prior to the accident. The article concludes with the rather harsh sentence, "The back of his head was torn off, and he will never drink any more Finleyville whiskey." Mail bags were stolen from their hooks at the Hackett and Anderson stations in 1904. It was later determined that the bags were stolen by robbers riding freight train number 85 heading west. When the crime was discovered, news of it was wired to Washington, PA, to the operator, who was instructed to notify the police to meet the number 85 train. The train was met at Washington and searched, but the thieves had managed to escape at one of the train stops between the scenes of the crime and Washington. In case some of you aren't familiar with what these mailbags on hooks along rail lines looked like, I've included a picture of one here. In 1931, 4 young men were arrested and charged with stealing from the cornfields and spring houses of McMurray farmers. Apparently, the 4 men had already stolen milk from farmer Walter Lucian 3 times during the first week of August. So Lucian and James Sutman, an employee of the neighboring Lafferty farm, lay in wait near the Lucian spring house in case the men returned, which they did. As the thieves were starting to load cans of stolen milk into their car, Lucian and Sutman shot at them, injuring 2 of the men. All 4 were eventually caught and jailed. This is one of my favorite headlines. In 1933, Walter C. Malone of Washington was arrested and sentenced to 1 year in Allegheny County Workhouse for stealing chickens from Peters Township farms. Apparently, Malone admitted to dropping some kind of chemical tablet into a pan of water that created fumes that overcame the chickens and caused them to topple noiselessly from their roosts, at which point Malone would make off with them. When I came across this article, I just had to include it because Lois May is one of our regular attendees at our Thursday sessions. The article reports that on Saturday, June 5th, 1958, Lois May Houston and Ray Fosbaugh were married in a beautiful candlelit service at Center Presbyterian Church. Reverend Joseph Rogers performed the double ring ceremony in which both the bride and groom received a wedding ring. Following the service, a reception for approximately 200 guests was held in the church parlor. The couple spent their 2-week honeymoon in Cape Cod. In 1955, the Peters Township Chamber of Commerce started publishing a monthly newsletter. The headline, "Cemetery Site Fought," appeared in the July issue of the newsletter. Apparently on June 29, 1955, a deed was recorded in Washington for Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Peters Township. The same day, a burial was attempted at the brand new cemetery. When the truck driver arrived with the vault to be buried, he was unable to find the cemetery because no changes had yet been made to the property. Residents called the police, and when they arrived on the scene, the truck left with its cargo. A meeting was held on July 6th in the Peters Township Firehouse. Mr. Stevenson, president of Forest Lawn, claimed he had been told that all he had to do prior to having a burial on the site was to obtain title to the land, which he had done that same day. He was quickly disabused of this notion. It was also pointed out at the meeting that Forest Lawn, as a nonprofit organization, would be exempt from paying property taxes, and that the 70 acres of land on which it was located could have housed 140 homes, which, at 8 mills per home, would have brought much needed tax income to Peters. Did any of you listen to the Peters Township Hour on WJPA that aired every Sunday afternoon at 12:30 in the 1950s and 1960s? Early in 1958, the Bell Telephone Company of Pennsylvania announced that McMurray customers will enjoy dial service beginning February 16th. Residents were to be given new Wilson numbers consisting of the letters WI followed by 5 numbers and would be able to dial all local calls and many long-distance ones. Peters Township saw its share of tragedies that made it into the newspaper as well. In March of 1958, 5-year-old David Brown was playing at his aunt's house in Peters Township when he reached up to the mantel for a ship. Sadly, the mantel slab and 2 other rows of stone toppled over and fractured David's skull. His 2 playmates escaped injury. I included this advertisement for the 1958 Firemen's Fair because several of you have spoken about it fondly. Apparently, the fair was held on the area on South Washington Road between Vitty's and the Elmer Johnston home. Tickets were available for half price, which was $10 for $1 at the Crossroads Esso station prior to the fair. In October of 1958, it was reported that 4 Pittsburgh youths had been arrested by Peters Township police officers Robert Clark and Thomas Lytle. During their interrogation, it was discovered that the youths had planned to burglarize every business along Route 19. Luckily, they'd only managed to steal 15 tires from Joseph Anthony's Atlantic service station at the corner of Route 19 and Valleybrook Roads, and meat and cheese from Tony Giaccone's 7-Eleven market on North Washington Road before they were caught. These clearly weren't career criminals. I included this advertisement for the opening of the Loblaw store at Donaldson's Crossroads because we talked about it during the Donaldson's Crossroads program and nobody could remember exactly when it opened. It turns out it opened on Thursday, January 8th, 1959. Peters Township's Williamsburg Inn was destroyed by fire in April of 1959. The inn, formerly known as the Colonial Inn and located a half-mile north of Donaldson's Crossroads, had recently been renovated, a new baby grand piano purchased for the tap room, and an organ for the dining room. The fire started around 5:30 a.m. on Saturday, April 4th. Peters Township Fire Chief Charles Addis summoned Canonsburg and Upper St. Clair volunteer firefighters to assist. Complicating efforts was the fact that a gas line in the basement broke and fed the fire. The 3 fire departments fought the fire for 5 hours. By the time it was finally extinguished, all that remained of the inn was a shell and the top dormers. At the time that this article was written, the cause of the fire had not yet been determined, but it was believed to have started in the basement. The Ladies' Auxiliary of the Peters Township Volunteer Fire Department wished to thank the Hollywood Barbecue, M&M Lounge, and Beals Motel for their donations of coffee and donuts for the firefighters. In 1961, Peters Township raised its tax rate to 62 mills. It's important to note that the millage rate must have been calculated differently than it is today, because according to the Peters Township Municipal Government website, the current municipal real estate tax is 1.7 mills, and the Peters Township School District real estate tax is 16.28 mills. Anyway, following the tax increase in 1961, a dozen Peters Township taxpayers promptly notified the township that they were actually located in Nottingham Township, even though they'd been paying in Peters Township for 2 years. It's important to note that the tax rate in Nottingham Township was only 30 mills. This led to an investigation of township boundary lines by officials of Peters and Nottingham Townships, after which most of the border hoppers were placed back in Peters Township. Some of you mentioned this unfortunate event at our police department program. According to this article, 2 Finleyville firefighters, Assistant Chief John Stark and Arvin Kegel, died when their pumper truck, en route to fight a fire at Hills Station, left Bebout Road, formerly the McMurray Venetia Road, went over an embankment, overturned, and caught fire. 7 other firefighters were injured in the crash, 5 of them critically. David Falloon, driver of the Peters Township VFW Post Ambulance, was lauded for crawling into the fuel-soaked cab of the truck to administer oxygen to Kegel, who was trapped in the cab for more than an hour. The Peters Township Volunteer Fire Department sent its reserve truck to the scene of the crash to help put out the fire. Its other trucks were already at Hills Station. In February of 1967, Canonsburg's The Daily Notes newspaper reported Bob Gardner's arrival in Peters Township. Gardner was an employee of Jerome Cargill Incorporated of New York. He was in town to stage Century Capers 67 at Peters Township High School. Century Capers was a show sponsored by the McMurray Century Club, a local women's organization, the proceeds of which were to benefit a Peters Township Youth Center. The show was comprised of dance routines, musical numbers, comic sketches, and solo presentations, all performed by an enthusiastic cast of more than 100 locals. If you attended my police department program, you've already seen this article. In the summer of 1975, more than 30 marijuana plants were found in patches between Bebout and Thomas Roads. The police burned the plants on the morning of Friday, July 25th. Peters Township Police Lieutenant Gene Fetty was quoted as saying, "I guess you could say that was 100 hours of work that went up in smoke." I had to laugh when I saw this article appear 3 months after the previous one. Of course, drug use was down. The police had just destroyed all of the township's marijuana plants. In the fall of 1975, Peters Township Police Chief William McIntosh reported to the Observer Reporter that in 1971, 57 teenagers had been charged with underage drinking, while in 1974, 116 persons were arrested for the same offense, with male offenders outnumbering females 5-1. When it came to crime in Peters Township in 1975, underage drinking, drug use, trespassing, theft, and burglary topped the list of offenses. Peters Township celebrated its 200th birthday in July of 1981. The bicentennial was celebrated in the township from July 11th to 18th, and the celebrations included a Miss Peters Township pageant, a parade down Route 19 from Donaldson's Crossroads to the Krebs Professional Center, a musical review, free hot air balloon rides at the Peters Township High School football field, early American square dancing, and a cultural show by the Three Rivers American Indian Center. The celebrations concluded with Peters Township Community Day on July 18th at Peterswood Park, featuring a softball game, a greased pig contest, mud wrestling, barbershop quartets, and games, refreshments, and displays. Can anyone guess what this headline is referring to? That's right, mine subsidence. In March of 1988, Peters Township School District accepted a settlement of $8 million over 18 years for the mine subsidence damage to 3 Peters Township schools from the Hartford Accident and Indemnity Company. The district sued the insurance company in 1985 when it refused to pay for damage to the Peters Township Middle School and McMurray Elementary. In 1988, the school district and the insurance company joined forces and filed suit against the Consolidation Coal Company for $10 million, charging that the company, which owned the mine underneath the schools, Montour Mine No. 4, was negligent. This particular headline refers specifically to some Peters Township homeowners near the affected schools. My coworker Sydney told me about the event that led me to this particular headline. Whitey, a large white pony, was one of several ponies available for children to ride at the Peters Township Community Day held on June 26, 1993 in Peterswood Park. The Blue Ribbon 4-H Club ran the pony ride as a fundraising event. Sadly, Whitey died 5 days later and tested positive for rabies. This led to the Allegheny County Health Department to issue a rabies warning for anyone who had ridden Whitey. As a result, at least 39 people underwent a series of 6 rabies shots. The concern was about secondary contact that can be caused by an open sore or by contact with the horse's saliva. Apparently, the incubation period for secondary contact can be up to 1 year, and once symptoms begin, rabies is usually fatal. In order to have sufficient quantities of the rabies vaccine on hand to treat all those seeking treatment, Canonsburg General Hospital had additional quantities of rabies vaccine flown in from California. In 1993, the state rabies law required the vaccination of dogs and house cats over 3 months of age, but did not require the vaccination of farm animals. That has since changed. Thank you for listening. The next Those With the Days program will be held on Thursday, September 11th at 11 a.m., We will be discussing the McMurray Century Club, a local women's organization that existed from 1951 until 1991.